Hi all, I welcome you to this contributor training series. Today we'll be talking about Meshery models, and we have been doing this series for a couple of weeks. We take a particular component in Meshery, and there are folks who are leading into that area, and they walk you through it, like how you can set it up locally, and if you would like to contribute, what are the things that you need to keep in mind, and those sort of things. Today, it would be basically on Meshery models, and we have got Aabid, who is also one of the UI maintainers. He will be talking about it. This session and the slides, they will be available onto our sites and also YouTube. So don't feel like you will be missing on anything. We'll be publishing them as we are done with the call. Throughout the call, if you get any question, Aabid will be open to taking those. So feel free to put them in chat, and maybe after the call, the session ends, he will be answering. So that was it. I really am excited for it. You can take it up.
Yeah, thanks, Meg, for the introduction. I think you already talked everything about it. So, hi everybody, I'm Aabid Sofi, and I'm a maintainer of Meshery. So, particularly, I maintain the UI side of the area, and also sometimes I do contribute to backend. And today, I will be talking about Meshery models and how to contribute to them, what they are, and how they are useful. So, we'll go probably in depth in a couple of areas, and might just give you some hints about how we are progressing in other areas. So, probably let's get into it. So before talking about Meshery models, I think we have some couple of guys that are pretty newcomers that we mentioned just came from the newcomers call. So I'll just give a quick introduction about what Meshery is and how Meshery models fit into the whole ecosystem. So Meshery, as we like usually the pitch deck for Meshery is that it's an extensible cloud native management software. So there's like two important things here, that it's extensible and it's a management software. So Meshery itself doesn't run your infrastructure, but what it does is it helps you manage the infrastructure. Like Meshery is anything Kubernetes, so it's anything cloud native. So it's not limited just to Kubernetes or some particular set of cloud native technology. It can work with any kind of cloud native technology, and there lies the thing. So how do we are able to manage all kinds of cloud native things? Was it's a pretty big ecosystem of work of cloud native. So there comes the Meshery models. So Meshery models are the essentially one of the extensible areas of Meshery. So because Meshery manages a large catalog of cloud native technologies, how we are defining them and how we are able to orchestrate some of it, how we are able to manage some of the technologies is defined inside these Meshery models. So like as inside the slide, we have a pretty simple definition for this pretty big construct or like pretty complex construct. So Meshery model basically is a unit of packaging for all of the logical constructs that Meshery manages, or all of the things related to infrastructure and all of the capabilities that Meshery has. We group them using these Meshery models, or maybe might just for the rest of the column might just say models, and I will be referring to Meshery models and not any other models. So this is just a kind of a unit of packaging. So you can think of it like as a box where all of these capabilities and all of the magical things that Meshery does are contained inside. So why do we need to group this? So there are like pretty necessary things that we need to do, like why we need to group all of these together. First is like portability, because like all of these individual components that we are grouping together inside the models, we need to like transport them. Like we might need to share them, we might need to persist them, we might need to like just have a backup of all the capabilities that there. So all of these we won't be doing it individual basis. Like we won't be having somewhere storing our components, somewhere storing our relationships. Then we won't know how to link them together and how to again get them into our system. So the models are like the basic units of packaging. So it makes it easier to have these individual capabilities that are kind of like linked together, so we can be easily share them, easily persist them. So what Meshery model right now, so this is list of the things that Meshery models contain right now. These might like increase in future because we might have some other things that Meshery might manage or might be using. So those might also go inside the model. So right now Meshery models contains like components, relationships, policies, connections, and credentials. So all of these are like can have a separate session, or we can have a separate session of all of these in on individual basis. So I will like give a quick glance of all of the things that we are currently having inside the model. So let's probably start from this nice diagram that we have had that shows you how the things are related to each other and how they are grouped together. So inside the models, we have something called a component, we have relationships, we have policies, and we have also connections and credentials. So components, you can think of these as the basic set of capability that you are going to represent. Like it might be something like a pod in your infrastructure, so you have to represent a pod some way in our system, or it might be a Prometheus server, or it might just be some icon that you are using like in your like day-to-day diagram, so you want to represent it some way. So like the components can be like actually semantic things that are related to an infrastructure that can be orchestrated, or they might be just some annotation that you want or that you are needing, or some actually some other interesting components also. Like if you want to have comments in your designs, you can have a component for them and you can manage its life cycle, or you might have some other interesting like things. So it's basically like these are the basic unit of capability. So you can have, you can define these capabilities and you can then put them inside these components. So this is an abstraction about all of the things that were mentioned, like related to infrastructure. So it can, you can have a component related to pod. And the another interesting thing is the relationship. So what these relationships are, these define how these individual components interact with each other. So as we have lots of folks from Kubernetes, so one of the kind of the basic things in Kubernetes are the relationship between namespaces and components. So some of the components that are namespaced always need a namespace, so they can't exist without a namespace. So there is kind of this parent-child dependency between a namespace and namespace components, like a deployment or a pod. So how do we codify that relationship is using this, like the relations. So this behavior is using relationships. So I think there's actually a pretty neat diagram already in this slide of how this parent thing is a relationship and these individual components are the namespace components, and this is codified actually using the Meshery's relationship definitions. And related to relationships are like policies. So these kind of, these are not actually just related to relationships but kind of go hand in hand. So policies actually define some, like some dynamic behavior between your components, or if you have some, you want to set some constraints or some, or want people to adhere to some constraint, you can define them using policy. So you might say like you want all of the replicas to be greater than 2 for all of your components, so you can define that using a policy. Or you might say like no component should exist inside your infrastructure without a proper defined namespace, or like any kind. Or you might just say like you might have some policy regarding your financial constraints, like you might say like the CPUs shouldn't exceed this number, or you might say the cost of the whole infrastructure shouldn't exceed a particular amount. These dynamic things can be defined using policies. So one of the kinds of policies that exist right now inside the system, or this kind of policy that we support right now, are called relationship evaluation policies. So that's why I was saying they relate to relationships. So right now one of the ways that we use policies is for kind of evaluating the validity or inferring relationships from your infrastructure, because like you might have a cluster running and you want to know how different components inside that cluster are like are related to each other. Using these policies you can dynamically infer them and validate the relationships between your policies, and also validate like all of the existing relationships inside your infrastructure. And another two important constructs are connections and credentials. I think these are one of the few constructs that don't get enough love. So I'll go through them also. So connections are a way to manage some of the, actually yeah. So let me share this slide. So connections relate some like are used to define the managed or unmanaged resources that we kind of maintain ourselves, or maybe we don't maintain them, so we call them unmanaged resources. Like the, like if we have a GitHub connection, so that's, we don't like maintain its life cycle throughout, like we don't create a GitHub server for you, but we do manage it to some extent, so it's an unmanaged resource. But some of the other resources are more managed by Meshery. But what we do is like we track the life cycle of these resources end to end and help you interact with them and help the other like ecosystem of Meshery interact with them. So one of the things that is pretty prominent in Meshery you would see is like a Kubernetes selection. Like anything you would do, you would probably have to, like if you want to deploy a design, you would need to go through a wizard, and it at the end it will tell you to which Kubernetes connection you want to select, like on which cluster you want to deploy it, or if you want to ingest data from some cluster, you would have to first have a Kubernetes cluster running. So all of these things are represented as a connection. So it's kind of like very essential if you want to do something, like if you want to touch some infrastructure, you need to have a connection to the Kubernetes. And credentials are pretty much related to connection. So these are basically kind of the authentication details to interact with a connection. So you might have a secret to access your Kubernetes cluster, that needs to be put as a credential. And same for like GitHub, you need some credential to actually access your GitHub repositories. Or and in future would also probably support like having Helm repositories as a connection. So that will also need a credential. So these two are pretty much tied to each other and need to kind of have a complete workflow for connections and credentials. So I think before I like jump into the like actual like contributing part of the models, actually I think I might just ask you a quick question. Like, how many of you guys have ever tried to like do anything with models? Because I've seen a pretty much interest in like defining new models. So just a like or something inside the Zoom might help me knowing what kind of audience we're having today. So if you have like ever done anything related to Meshery models, or you know anything about it, just have a yeah wave, yeah, nice wave. And nice. So we have. I will probably start from scratch because I am seeing pretty little ways. Okay, thanks, Mahadevan. So actually, yeah. So this slide, I'm just showing you how one of the ways we are having models right now in system, just to like tie off the earlier thing. So this is a pretty much a simple example of the one of the models that we pretty extensively support. So it's the Kubernetes model, and you can see these models are version constructs. So we can have different versions of the model. So right now you can see this is the Kubernetes model, and where multiple versions of it inside the system. There is, I think, version 132, 133, 134. All of these in like versions live independently, so we can have multiple versions of the model, and each version can have its own components, its own relationships, its own policies. And you can see there are the components, there are these relationships for the Kubernetes model. And this small file called model.json, think of it as kind of a metadata for the model. It defines like how this model looks, and like some details about the model, like a description and name. So this is kind of the metadata for the whole model file. So this image is just like the constituents of the components. So these are the multiple kinds of components that this model supports or are included in this model. So I think one of the important things that we wanted to do in this training session was like telling the story of like how these models are extensible, how you can contribute to these models. So I will go through a couple of flows of like kind of like building these models from scratch, and also like kind of discovering some of them if you have some existing resources, like maybe a Helm chart of your existing infrastructure, or some other CRDs that you want Meshery to use. So you can also generate automatically kind of generate components out of them. So I'll be going through that. So one of the things that right now we do support is this Meshery model builder wizard, which you can find inside Meshery UI. So I'll quickly exit the slides and go through and demo this from Meshery's UI. So one of the things that we might look throughout this talk is this UI. This is called the Meshes registry UI. So this is the place where you will find all of the constructs, or all of these logical constructs are meshed together. So you will all see like the models, the components, the relationships in your system, the registrants which are like used while those models are actually registered from. Actually, this registrant is also a connection. So this is a connection where these models are being registered from. So you will see all of that stuff from here, and you can debug like which models you have in your system and which are enabled. So I won't digress much, but let's go through the model generator wizard. So first let me actually show, these are like, there are two ways to go through this. One is like generating from scratch, which we will be doing right now, and another is importing. So we will be going through generating the models from scratch and sourcing the CRDs somewhere. So you would get through on this model, and you can actually, they are like, the first thing that we would do is like give our model some name. So I have some CRDs lying from artifact up for the model for this thing called Entria. So I'll add say the name something like Entria and give up the model a display name. So the display name is what's actually shown on most of the years. So you, it's like kind of the friendly name for the model, and this thing is the unique name that you will give to the model, and this is what how it's registered inside the system. But this name, the model display name, is the human friendly name, so you can have spaces, you can capitalize it or format in the way you like. So I'll probably just capitalize it because it's just a single word. Otherwise I might have just added a space also, but I can still do it, like I can call it the Entria model. So I'll keep it Entria, and after that I'll go to the next stage, and it's like this a pretty simple stage. So in first I just gave it name. So here we just categorize the model, because models, I think inside this slide you might have already shown as a high level thing is like categories and subcategories that we support for like grouping these models, so it's easier to manage and easier to find. So I'll be giving this category. So let's see how they said. So it's a networking based thing. So I'll give it the category of cloud native network. Yeah, let's call it API integration. And so I've given it a category and subcategory, so it's easy to find and look up. So on the next stage, we can give it some particular styling. So because we are going to have these models represented in a couple of places in the Meshery, and other extensions also leverage it and showed like in different visual ways. So we'd give it a nice icon, so we can give it the colors and the shape. So let's give it a maybe a rectangle shape, a primary color of maybe purple. Okay, and green. I think, yeah, we like green. So you can keep these two things, and if we go on to now to the next stage. So yeah, this is kind of the nice and magical thing that would happen, and you might get excited about this. So because right now we want hard code anything, or we want to use like coding the actual infrastructure or anything. So what we would do is like, because we already have the capability as CRD, so we know like we want to use these CRDs and manage them from Meshery. What we do is like we provide a source for creating the components, or the individual, like as we said, the components are the individual unit which we are going to represent, and we want to represent all the CRDs inside the Entria. So what we'll do is like we'll give it a source, and it can be either a GitHub repo that has the maybe has the Helm chart or the CRDs, or you can also give it a link to the artifact hub. So I'll be giving it a link to here for artifact hub, so you can use this. You can see these are all of the charts and components and operators that would be found. So if I go here and give it the link, and next, so this is another thing here. So what this right now is asking us is like, is this what you are trying to import, or sorry, what you are trying to create, is it like going to touch actual infrastructure, or is it semantic, or are you just trying to create some annotations or some just things that are only going to do have some visual behavior, like are you going to create some icons, or is this model just going to have some annotation? But right now I will not check this, because we are going to create actual components and from the CRD. So on the next stage, this is kind of a nice receipt of all of the things that we already filled. So it will tell me what the name were, what the logos. So actually, I think I forgot that the logos, and this is the source, and this is the URL for it, and this is not a annotation model. So on the next step, we'd hit generate, and it will like talk with Meshy server and generate all this model. So I should have also received a, yeah, so I should have received an event back from Meshy giving me the whole receipt of all of the components that were generated from this model. So this is the entire model. So just few seconds ago, what we have generated from this model for this model are these like these 18 components that were auto like generated from the CRD. So we didn't put all of these 18 things there. So these are like automatically generated from just giving the source. So let's just confirm that. What we can do is like on here we can click this registry link, and it should try to open the registry and filter on like this newly generated model. So yeah, let's wait a second. So yeah, we have the enter model, and so actually we have 108 components. So this is because I'm running this against the playground environment, and there are like lots of components already registered here on playground. So I just like kind of added duplicate components for this model. So there would be lots of duplicates if I open this. You can see like this single component is like registered multiple times, so you can, so yeah, actually I think this is another feature that I can show now, because we do support like duplicates from model form components inside a model, because you might have multiple registrants that are trying to like register these models. So right now, as we register this from Artifact Hub, somebody might be trying to register the same components from GitHub, or maybe some components might be auto discovering from Kubernetes. So what we do is like we allow duplicates, so we don't like kind of override each registrant. So these all of these components will be here, and what you can do is like from directly from this registry is like you can first like interact and see what the constants of each of these components are, and you can also like enable or ignore the model. So because like there are lots of things inside your registry, but you might not need all of this, or you might not want your like want to use some models. So what you can do is like can just ignore them, and after that these won't be used to like when you are discovering your infrastructure, or if you are trying to design new infrastructure, these components won't be available for you to use. So but I will keep it enabled because this is the playground environment and somebody is going to use it, so I won't mess this up. So like this is the kind of the generate flow where you generate the model from scratch, where you and also source the CRDs or the components from somewhere else. The another flow for generating models, like earlier I mentioned, like maybe if you have to create a model that just contains some annotation. So these are not actual infrastructure elements that you're going to orchestrate, but these are just some annotation that you might want for to just use for diagramming purposes or some other purpose, but just some annotations. So what you can do is like you can go through this. They are actually this is actually might change in future, like how we have tied these two flows together. We might just put it again inside the create flow, but right now where you can find this another flow is where you can individually add the components is from the CSV import flow. So let's go through this. So what we do in this CSV import flow is like we allow the users to kind of like manually or in bulk add all of the models, all of the components, all of the relationships together. So it's not like we won't be auto discovering anything, and we won't be like going through a pretty wizard, but we allow you to have like just bulk import anything. So what I will be doing is like what I'll be downloading a CSV template file. So what this template file is just kind of a pre-filled template that we expect for this model. So there's some dummy things already inside this template. So actually I've done it right. Yeah, I think I've already imported it into Google Sheets. So this is the constants of the template file. So I actually added a new model in here just for this purpose. So this model is called Meshery mascots, and what it would contain is some pretty images of the mascots that we use for Meshery. And actually the database, the description is wrong. So we'll be going through this flow to import this new model, which we like just defined here, and also the components of this model. So the model name would be Mesh mascot, and the display name, as we already mentioned, the name that will be shown is Mesh mascot with a space, and we are given the category, subcategory, and a nice description. Actually, we don't need this source URL here, and you can put the website and the docs link also. But another important thing is for the visual presentation is to have some shape to it, some color, some secondary color to it. So some this is the primary color that we use for the backgrounds, and you can also put other styles, and you can like look all of these properties inside the like inside the schema for the model, and also like inside the documentation that's linked inside the slide, so to know which fields you can add and what how they affect your generated model. So we already have the SVGs and the SVG white SVG color given to it, and this the important thing here is the is annotation flag. So this is used to tell Meshery that this is just an annotation. It won't be deployed. It won't be like orchestrated or managed in other ways by Meshery. So it's just for annotation purposes, and we have set it to true. And so this is kind of the single model that would be importing. So if I go back to my import wizard, so I'll add this here. So I'll download it as CSV. So this is the models CSV for this machine mascots model. So I will open this up. So I've added the models sheet now, or CSV here. So actually what we can do could have done is like we could also have multiple models. This is not just for a single model. Like it's not necessary to have just one model. You can have multiple models also defined inside the sheet. So we'll do see the same for component CSV. So right now we're already like kind of added the model CSV. So the next thing is to have some components inside the model, some relationships inside the model, and we can then finish off the generation. So I will go through the component sheet. So I think I also edited here. Yeah, these are the two components that I will be having inside this new model. So they are like two components. One is called the alpha and beta, and these are just two mascots that we have for the Meshery mascots model, and these are the SVGs for it. So you can have the whole. You have to have the whole SVG. I think one thing that won't work, you might try but won't work right now here, is like if you try a link, so that might not work. So this needs to be an actual SVG here. So we have two SVGs for color and two SVGs for white. So the difference between SVG color and SVG white is like how these are used in different places. So SVG white is usually used when we are trying to represent the component on dark backgrounds, and SVG color is used when we are trying to show the component on light background. So this is the white version, and this is also the colorful version. Sorry, yeah, this SVG color, and same for primary and secondary color. So these are used for the backgrounds and for background of the component, and the shape gives a shape overall to the background of the component. So you can have a circle. There actually are lots of shapes that are supported, and there is a doc for that which I've linked at the slide, so you can know like what are the possible values for the shapes. And these are like just the individual styles that you can give to the components, like how you want this background opacity to be, what color you want it to be, what border radius you want the components to have. So you can style your components to a liking or how you want it to be represented. So, and the same thing for is annotation is the same way we represent it in models. So this tells Meshery that this is just an annotation and it won't be like try to be deployed on any other way. So yeah, this is marks it just as a pure annotation. So we have these two again. Again, download the CSV and I'll import the CSV also here. So we have the component CSV, and after that we have the relationship. So because this is kind of an annotation model, I won't have any specific relationships for it, so I can just import the dummy relation, basically the empty relationships file that you can also download as a template. And next I will try to generate the model now. So if everything goes right, we should have some new components. So I should get back yeah, a message for the new components that were generated or like created from this importing these CSV. So yeah, you can see we have two components added. One is the alpha and one is beta. So both of these have version 1 because we defined that version here. These are the two components that we imported. Like we manually defined these components inside the CSV, and then we imported the CSV using Meshery UI. So I can again go into the registries to see like why these new components, new models are. So we have this new model called Meshery mascots now, and it should have some components inside it. Okay, again, I think I might have imported it multiple times, so we have like two versions of each of these components. So this is the icon that we defined there for alpha, and this is the one for beta. You can see I think it might not be visible because it's dark, but yeah, these are the two components that were added. So because like mesh, as we mentioned I think earlier, that mesh is an extensible platform, so there are multiple extensions that use these models and represent them in different ways, and there are different like features that you can access using extensions. So one of the extensions that's right now in my system is canvas that's available on Playground. You can interact with all of these models and components from here also, and kind of diagram your infrastructure using this extension. So what I wanted to actually show is like how this is the same thing. Like here you can see all of these categories here, and inside all of these categories you would see the models. So these are all of the models inside the cloud native network, and I think we should see the, yeah, these are like the actual components that are related to infrastructure. These are like the semantic components that we would be able to manage and orchestrate. But there's the annotation models that we created just now are inside this shape. So you should see the mascots model here. So this is the one that we just generated, and it would have just two components, these alpha and beta. So I think it's pretty small. Actually, I think you won't be able to see it. Yeah, the SVG is pretty small, so you can set the dimensions for the SVG so they look nice. But yeah, this is another annotation that we had in this system. It's called Comet. As I said, some annotations might be complex, some might be simple. It depends on the capabilities that you assign to the annotations or any of the components. So yeah, that's what I was actually going to talk about. So is the capability. So you can assign a set of different sets of capabilities to all of these components, so they would define, so they would behave differently. So one of the, this is a comment component, and it says a different set of capabilities. Like it has this resolve capability, which when you click it just goes out of the view because it gets resolved. And other components can have capabilities like the ability to style. Some might have the capability to like actually configure their schemas because they are like actually related to infrastructure. So you would have a schema available from them which would be sourced from CRE, so you can configure them. So let's take an example. Like this is the component that were sourced from the Kubernetes model, so you can actually fill up their configuration and actually deploy and orchestrate them. So these, all of these behaviors are like extensible, and you can actually define them inside your components, and you can vary them between different components. So it's up to you, like what kind of capabilities you want your components or models to have. So like these are like kind of, these were the two ways you can like create new or like contribute to the model. So you can have start from scratch and source some the like components from some place like an artifact hub or a GitHub repo or any other Helm chart that you have access to. Or you might like manually create these components inside the CSV and then import that CSV. So one of the things that we are, I think, looking into future is like having the ability to kind of completely define these new components directly inside kind of a wizard similar to this. So you would fill the component information inside the wizard, and then you can like keep going and keep adding components similar to how we filled the model. But yeah, that's something that we'll be looking into future. So like similar to Meshery UI, we also have a CLI client. So Meshery UI is like kind of a like a front-end client for Meshery. So in similar to this, we have a command line client also, which is called Meshery CTL, and it also supports a variety of commands to make you easier to work and contribute to models. So we'll go through a couple of these commands. So one of the commands is the Meshery model init, which is still experimental, and there might be a bug or two which you might fall into because it's still experimental. But this command is used to generate kind of a scaffold for your model. So if you want, like if you're thinking to generate a model, let's say for some kind of some icons or some dev icons that you want to use in you, like when you're designing your infrastructure, or maybe for some infrastructure operator or something, you can you would like, you want manually create all of these folders, these files, because you don't know like what to expect there, or you would need to like go through whole documentation a couple of times to know what folder you need to create. So what you can do is like you can use this command to generate a quick scaffold of your model. So I have Meshy CTL installed here, so what I can do is like I can use this command model. So I will probably just generate, I think I already done this one. So we'll just generate annotations only icons model for autobots. I'll have some transformers there, so I can do this. I think there already exists a model for this right now. I'll just remove this to show you, and I can do this again, and it should generate a scaffold with some templates for all this model. So you can see there's some logs coming up like what we did, and like we have created some sample components, some sample relationships for your model, some sample connections, some sample credentials, and this is just some information to how to like proceed further. So we can go into the this autobots folder or model, and we can edit the model to JSON, which is basically the manifest file that contains the, while we can set the icons name and other things related to the model, and then we might go and edit individual components and like finish off our models. I think I'm running low on time, so I won't going through this like flow completely, but I will just show you what was generated out of this. So if I, so you can see there's an initial version generated. So you are now starting from v0.1. So if I go inside this version, you will see all of the components, connections, credentials, and relationships generated for like for this model. So you can now, what you can do is like you can edit, open your text editor and just start editing each of these, or like adding some new components that as you wish. And after that, this second, because now you have kind of like created this model for yourself, and you, but like this won't do much benefit for you because it's just lying on your file system. What you would want is like either you would want it to be imported into your Meshery, so you can Meshery server, so you can start using it. You can use it to diagram, you can use it now to use it to manage your infrastructure, or maybe you want just to share it with your friends, or just publicly share it because you spent some time here and you want to now have other people's access to it. You can share it. So what we can do is like, let's go first of just like having like importing it. So one of the commands that Meshery has is kind of the same as the how we saw inside the UI, where we were able to import from CSV from UI. Also, we can import from different versions, like different formats. We can import from an OCI image as CSV file. So same thing happens here in CLI. We can import the model in like if it's present in different formats. So right now, because I'm inside Meshery, we have like kind of a directory full of existing models that Meshery comes pre-packaged with. So I will just try to import one of the existing models that's lying on my system. So if I do meshery, so these commands are not experimental, these are like pretty stable. So we'll do model import, and so just go again with this entria model that's already lying on my system. So I'll try to import it using the CLI now. So if I do this, and after some time it should give me a log back of all of the components that were like imported from this. So it's again just 18 components from this model. All of these are now imported into my Meshy server's registry. So I think I've again set this Meshery client is logged into the playground. So these will be again generated inside, like registered inside the playground server. So the duplicate should be rising because I'm just registering these again and importing these again. So this is how you can like import existing models, whether you have like them lying on your file system, or whether you have like an OCI image for it that somebody has shared with you, or you have a CSV file that you generated like manually or somebody shared with you. You can use either the CLI using the model import command, or the UI using the import wizard to like import the model into your registry. So actually, let me show why that is in UI. So it's again inside this import flow. So you can click on this and you can, because the last time we just went to the CSV import where we imported our custom defined one. So, but we can also have a file import where you can just point to some existing model in your system. So you can see I have a OCI image of Antria.dart. So this is the OCI image I can, or I have some other like exascale icons. So I will just open it, and next time it will start importing. So it's like you can see it's again all of those 18 components. So this is like exactly same behavior from the Meshery client and Meshery UI. You can use either of these to according to your convenience to import existing models in different package formats like CSV, a tar file, or maybe a remote URL, because we do support that also. If it's like somewhere on your GitHub repository and you want to import it, you can directly provide the URL here also. So let me just exit it. So you can see there's a URL port option also here. And so these are like the two things where you can create the model and import into their system. Another important thing that is like kind of like exporting your models, because like why we want to export is to share the models. So because these models are now when packaged are pretty portable, so you can share them, you can download them, you can keep them as a backup in your system, because you have this model you want to just keep as a backup for versioning purpose, or just keeping as a backup. You can do it, you can export it and keep it in your system, and you can import it using the flows that we mentioned whenever needed. So the export command is also pretty simple. You just call this meshyctl export and give it the name of the model. So I can do something like this: meshyctl export is model export, and I'll give it the name of the model that I want to export, because we have registered the entria model. It's already inside the system, so it can be exported now. So I can do this, and you can see it has exported this model into this file called enter.tar. So this is the OCI file for this. So they're already this here. So now because I think we already demonstrated like importing it, so now this file can be shared and it can be imported back into the system. So these are like how we can use the CLI to go through this model contributing process, or like manage, just basically like managing your models, because you might just have somebody might give you a model and you want to import it or register it into a system. You can use one of these commands to have do that. So you can like kind of, these are like pretty symmetric, like whether you go from UI or you go from CLI. So it depends on your convenience how you want to do it, but you have kind of the base same functionality in both ways. You can do everything from UI also. So I think we talked about this a bit orderly. So basically, these models now, when packaged, are pretty portable. These are in OCI format, so you can actually like you don't need to keep them in your like local SSD. You can actually put them inside any OCI compatible registry. Like you can push them to Docker Hub, you can push them to ECR. So because these are OCI compatible images, so you can keep them there, and you can use that as the kind of the persistent layer. You can push to the OCI hub, and you can like pull from there if you want to like use them in future. And if you want to share them, you can keep your all of your models on Docker Hub, or I think GitHub also supports OCI, like any other any place that supports like having OCI images, you can use that. So you can now share them, and all of these, like when you package that model, like we saw, you can have different versions of the model packaged together, so you can share all of them together with all of the components there. So it's easy if you want to give it to some friend and from like a local model that you have. And another thing is like, if you are going to share it and if you have want it to be public, what you can do is like Meshery supports a catalog, and that catalog can contain models. You can contribute to that. So if I go to, I think I already have it. Yeah, so Meshery has a catalog which can contain different things. So we have a catalog of like designs which are like well defined designs for some common infrastructure practice. These are inside the catalog, and also the models are inside the catalog, because all of the models might not come prepackaged with your Meshery server, because it will just bloat your server. You don't want like all 2000 models inside there and slow down your server. You would only want the things that you like kind of need. And there are different people from community adding new models to this catalog which you might be interested in, and you can add your own, because kind of the same way, because we just created this new model called, like let's say this was a new model that we created, this enter tar. So we now have the OCI image for this model. What you can do is like you can create a PR to this repo. So you can have this flow here. You can create the PR to this repo with your model and give it a nice name. And then the maintainers would go through that model and see like if you're not put something naughty in there, and will go through that, and we'll publish it to our catalog, and then it will be shown here. And what you can do is after that you can go through any of these models that are here. These are actually not just the community managed. So there's one model that was recently added by one of our community members. So it's called, I think, exoscale icon. So this is recently added and might not come packaged into your Meshy. So what you can, and if you want to use that, what you can do is like you can download it from the catalog, and it will again download the tar file for it, and you can go again from any of the earlier flows, like maybe from CLI or maybe from the UI. You can import it into your Meshy. So you can do a file import with this OCI image or the tar file, and you can just import it. and it will start importing and registering this model. So now after that, it would be available in your system. So yeah, but just quit this and wait, because this is an asynchronous icon. It can happen while the server, and it will give me a, or sometime it will give me back an event saying like what was imported. But yeah, that's the way you can like share the models. You can publish them to catalog for anybody, like for public access. So I think we have some time left, so I will be taking questions from you. So yeah, anybody has any questions or any feedback regarding, maybe if you have tried this, you might have some questions. So yeah.
Yeah. So currently, is there a way to create models, like annotation models through through URL? Like,
So like through URL, mean like if, what kind of source do you want it to be, like kind of maybe an icons library or some like what kind of URL like you want? What should that URL be pointing to?
I'm just like getting to know that, like, what kind of source it could be. Like if I presented a URL and I want to like create a URL annotation model through URL. So what are the possible sources that it could be?
Yeah, so like one thing that's already present right now is like if you have a, if it's like that model is stored somewhere, like if you have a URL to the model that's present on GitHub or any other like is on internet anywhere, you can just use the URL import. So this is the import flow. So these, why what this should be pointing to is an actually like currently defined model. So it should be a model, but it's not on your system. So if you have somebody gave you a model that's lying on their GitHub repo or maybe on their drive, you can use the link to import that, but it needs to be an existing model, whether yeah, whether it's an annotations model or like an actual semantic model, but it works both ways. But yeah, it needs to be an existing model. So right now we, I think you are, I know you are going to like probably like how we source the CRDs automatically. Yeah, we don't have that feature for annotations now, because like it's kind of not well defined how these things, whether you are pointing to what you are actually wanting to import, like how we would define that. But yeah, I think yeah, in future we might have some way to like auto discover icons. If you point to some icon library, we might auto discover all of the icons there, all of the SVGs basically. So we can have that kind of a source, like give us a repo of SVGs and we would auto import, or maybe some icons we would auto import, or maybe an image library would auto import. Yeah, right now it's like only we can import them if there's an existing model. We can't like automatically find them
Yeah,
from
because
some other
like
source.
I was working with uh, like Azure model. So in that scenario, like we have different CRDs over there, so it automatically picks that up. So
Yeah.
in the similar way, right now, it's, for annotation also, there's nothing.
Yeah, so yeah, in future we might have some way to like from, because there yeah it is kind of a possible, if we know it's an icon library, we might pick some icons. And also like we should, I think we can be a bit more intelligent how we take, like when we are generating the source from maybe CRD or a Helm chart, we might be, if the author of that CRD or Helm chart has provided some metadata, maybe they have provided an icon already, we might be able to pick that. But I think usually they don't do that. But yeah, we can have that kind of intelligence there to pick up some of the metadata from Helm charts or CRDs also, so to make it a bit easier. And I think, as I earlier mentioned, also we would want to this flow to be more better, have a better UX, so it's more easier for you guys to create components from the same flow, but and like modify the icons directly there. But yeah, that makes sense to have kind of automation there also for annotations.
I had another question. Am I audible, by the way?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so in the process of you importing models, we saw how you could import the same model multiple times
yeah.
and it would create just copies of the components inside that model. Is there any way to just go back on one of these imports to only delete the components from a single model import instead of having to do it manually?
Yeah, so right now there's one thing. that's it's kind of like we can't, there's no functionality to directly delete the models from your registry. Is kind of for audit purpose, and because like some, because if you are using these models or the components in some place like for a design, or if they are already ingested or discovered, so we don't want to delete them, because then all of that would break, like all of your existing designs would break, all of the imported stuff would break. So we don't try to like delete it from the registry. But what you can do is like for any of the components or models, you can kind of like ignore them, so in future you won't be able to use them, or they won't be auto discovered. But yeah, like there's no functionality to kind of like undo a particular like import run. So yeah, it might be a functionality if you go to the logs and you would just find all of the operations related to import, and you might just click like undo this import, undo this import. Yeah, that's kind of a feature we might have. But yeah, right now you can go manually and like ignore some of the components. And there's also this duplicate feature here, which you might use to actually just find the duplicate ones, because you might if you are like trimming the duplicates, you might first switch to this and then just cut off the duplicates. I think I might have lost my session with playground. Yeah, that was. But yeah, you can do
That makes
that.
sense, though. I do get what you mean. I had one more. I kind of just wanted to hear your thoughts on this. Um, in my head, it would make really a lot of sense to separate the visuals from the part that actually affects infrastructure. It was a kind of a curveball for me to call both a visual annotation a model as well as something that affects the infrastructure. Can you talk about at least how it came to be, and what are your thoughts on whether it creates any sort of hindrance?
So yeah, kind of we want a bit of division to not like confuse users. So like in different UIs, we try to like kind of divide that. So I think I was trying to show that in one place. Like this is one of the extensions that Meshery has. So here they are like differentiating it. So it's up to the like we can do that because we have the information of which ones are annotation only and which ones are which don't have any annotation, so we can use that to separate. So you can see here all of these components in here are like actual components like which will affect your infrastructure, which are orchestrable. So you will find all of those here, and in this like this shape speaker we will only have the shape, so you won't find any actual infrastructure related thing here. So all of these are just annotations in this speaker. So yeah, we try to do it in places like where we want to separate it. We use the like the in is annotation flag to do that. So the reason why we don't have to separate entities is like to prevent redundancy, because otherwise we have to kind of like re-implement a lot of things that we have already done for components like to for this annotation. Because apart, because as I talked earlier, like it's just a capability like to like we try to like kind of divide these or give particular components a set of capabilities. So we might have kind of a mixture of these. So a component is like stylable. So if I drop this component, this has like a capability to have custom styles. But we the same thing can be also done for any of these components. So even though these touch like actual infrastructure, we can like customize them, like we can edit their styles. And same way, like because this is an actual infrastructure component, we can like add some configuration to it, and after that I can like deploy it, and it will take this configuration and deploy to make Kubernetes cluster. But it's kind of like borderline, because I can have this comment component which is just an annotation, but I can still have some configuration or for some like data inside it. So I can have all of these comments inside it, so these are stored inside the component. So it's kind of like these, while like the only difference is like one can be actually orchestrable by some platform, the other can't be. But the features are kind of like similar or can be made similar. You can like assign different features to each of those, so there's no restriction on the capabilities that can be assigned to each of these components. So that's why we try to like them group them together inside the same category, and then on like particular UI, if it makes sense, we might like divide them based on like notation and just like the actual components that will touch infrastructure. But yeah, that makes sense, because yeah, it would otherwise get confusing, like how to like differentiate. And there's like kind of an open question here, like when you might also want to have some kind of visual presentation to different things. Like how you are going to visually show the infrastructure related components and how you are going to visually show the like the annotation. So right now what we are trying to do is like all of the annotations you would find usually would have like no background color but just a stroke. So you can see like these ones have some background color, but these are just a stroke, and that's mostly same for like all of these annotations. But yeah, it's kind of like we try to make the division visually and like just like virtually, but like actually these are kind of you defined using the same way, like using a component, whether it's an annotation or not.
That made a lot of sense. I mean, choosing either way would be a
Yeah,
bit of a hindrance either way.
yeah,
In my head, it would be much. It's hard to say. It would be much simpler as compared to the current option. But what comes naturally to me is if I'm adding something that's simply an annotation, simply something visual. Besides the import model button, there could be an import annotation button. But that's what I had in mind. Regardless, I'm very satisfied with the answer, and there couldn't have been a better introduction to models. Thank you so much for the talk.
yeah. Actually, yeah, that's a valid question, and that's a good suggestion. Like we kind of might have a maybe have a separate flow that's easier or like tailor made for just importing annotations, and that might make it easier to actually like if you're just creating annotation, it might be easier to go through that flow. Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Do we have any other questions before I hand off to Vivek? I think no. So yeah, thanks everybody. I think it was pretty nice and got some nice questions and good feedback from Nitesh and Yoginder. So yeah, thanks everybody for coming. So back to you, Vivek.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Aabid. So I'll quickly take the screen. Yeah, so thank you everyone for joining. I hope that you got the idea about what Meshery models are, and very hopefully we'll also have a session where the other two flows that Aabid talked about, we'll be demonstrating that hands-on. And so if you have maybe some icons, or if you actually have some custom operator that you would like to contribute to Meshery as models, you will be doing that hands-on in this call itself, like just you have done in newcomers meeting if any one of you were on that call. So it was really nice. Thanks a lot, Abid, and thanks a lot to all of you to join. Like any future session that we'll be, conducting, they will all be updated onto this GitHub tracker. So I'll quickly share that. And also, we will be sharing this slide and also the recording. It will be made available on our YouTube channel, and that will be posted on our community forum too. And so that there too, if you have any question, you can ask. In fact, if you have any question on the session, you also can continue in the Slack workspace. And I'm sure that you're part of the workspace. If you're not, I'll also share the link in chat. And in fact, I think you can go to the footer of this community forum itself and can get to our Slack. So I think that was it. Once again, thanks a lot. I'll see you all in Slack, everyone. Bye. I think, Abid, since you are host, you can end the call.
Yeah.